The house was quiet in the way places become quiet when respect has already left. A glass lay shattered near the doorway, fragments catching the light from the chandelier above. Somewhere deeper inside, laughter drifted down the hallway, careless, unrestrained, cruel in its ease. Ethan Rowe stood in the living room wearing his service uniform, jacket still buttoned, boots clean, posture straight. At 41, his bearing carried the weight of long discipline. He did not raise his voice. He did not move forward. Across the room, Marissa Rowe leaned against the arm of a man who did not belong in that house. Her smile was sharp, practiced, and dismissive. At 37, she wore confidence like armor, fingers curled possessively into the sleeve of the uniform beside her. That uniform belonged to General Lucien Ward. Ward stood comfortably, shoes on the rug Ethan had paid for, one hand resting at Marissa's waist as if the space had always been his. His rank carried authority. His age carried arrogance. At 54, he had learned which rules bent and which people broke. "You always did take things too seriously," Marissa said, her laugh light. "Even now, look at you." Her eyes dropped to Ethan's uniform, standing there like it still means something. Ward chuckled. "Still clinging to discipline," he said. "Admirable. Useless, but admirable." Ethan met his gaze once. Calm, unflinching. "This is my house," Ethan said. Ward smiled wider. "Not tonight." Marissa stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. "You really thought loyalty was enough?" she asked. "Power is what matters, access, influence." She reached out, fingers brushing Ethan's chest, then curled her hand and spat. The saliva struck the fabric of his uniform and slid downward. Marissa laughed. Ward did not stop her. He watched Ethan carefully, waiting for anger, for collapse, for noise. None came. "You're finished," Ward said casually. "Career, reputation, all of it. I can make one call and you won't even be wearing that uniform anymore." Ethan looked down briefly, not at the stain, but at the floor. Then he lifted his eyes again. "I followed orders," he said evenly. Marissa scoffed. "Orders?" She turned to Ward, laughing again. "He still thinks that matters." Ward wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Pack a bag," he told Ethan, "or don't. Either way, you're out." Ethan nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement. He reached into his pocket as his phone vibrated. The sound cut through the room. Marissa rolled her eyes. "Who's calling you now?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "Yes, sir," he said. Ward tilted his head, amused. "Yes, I understand," Ethan continued. "I'll proceed as instructed." Marissa laughed louder. "He's losing it." Ethan listened, still his expression unchanged. "Yes, sir," he said again. "Thank you." He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. Ward smirked. "Let me guess," he said. "Imaginary friends?" Ethan picked up his bag from beside the door. "I'll be in contact." Marissa laughed again as he walked past her. "Don't bother." Ethan stopped at the doorway, turned once, and looked at them together. Then he spoke, not to them but to the moment itself. "Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know." Ethan stepped out into the night. The door closed behind him. The house did not follow. He walked down the driveway without rushing, shoulders squared, breath controlled. Outside, the air was cold and steady. He set his bag down beside the curb and stood there for a moment, alone. Inside the house, laughter continued. Inside Ethan, nothing broke. He had loved Marissa. 9 years of shared mornings and quiet routines did not vanish in an instant. Later that night, sitting alone in a rented room, he would allow himself one moment of stillness. One moment where the weight pressed gently against his chest. Then he would set it aside, because the call he had answered was not imaginary, and the man who had laughed at him did not yet know his name had already crossed a line it could not uncross. Ward believed the house was the end of Ethan Rowe, but the call that interrupted their laughter was only the beginning. Morning came without apology. Ethan Rowe woke in a rented room that smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. The bed was narrow. The walls were thin. He sat on the edge of the mattress with his boots already on, uniform folded neatly beside him, movements deliberate and quiet. The night had passed without sleep, but not without thought. He had loved Marissa. 9 years did not vanish just because truth finally spoke out loud. There had been a moment, brief, contained, when the weight pressed against his chest harder than usual. He had allowed it. Then he had set it aside the way he had been trained to do with pain that served no purpose. He checked his phone. Nothing new. That did not concern him. By mid-morning, the story inside the house had already begun to rot. Marissa paced the kitchen with restless energy, coffee untouched on the counter. Ward sat at the table, relaxed, reading messages on his phone with the calm of a man who believed himself untouchable. "He actually took a bag and left," she said, laughing again, though it sounded thinner now. "Did you see his face?" Ward smiled. "Men like that don't know how to exist without structure. Give it a few days." "He answered a call," Marissa said, rolling her eyes. "Did you hear him?" "Yes, sir." "Like he was still important?" Ward chuckled. "Shock does that. The mind invents authority when it can't accept reality." He stood and straightened his jacket. "I'll make sure his command understands where he stands." Marissa's smile returned, sharp and eager. "Good." Neither of them noticed the small delay that followed. The call Ward expected to make did not connect the way it usually did. At a different location across the city, Ethan sat in a secure office that did not carry signs on its doors. The room was spare, functional. A single flag stood in the corner, unadorned. 2 men entered and closed the door behind them. Ethan rose. One of them nodded. "Sit." They did not waste time. "Your cover is intact," the first man said. "Their behavior aligns with the pattern." Ethan listened. No reaction. "The general moved exactly as expected," the second man added. "Threats, overconfidence, abuse of authority." Ethan nodded once. "They believe you're isolated," the first said, "that you've lost everything." Ethan folded his hands on the table. "That belief will hold." The men exchanged a glance. "There will be noise," one of them said. "Pushback. Attempts to discredit you." "I understand," Ethan replied. "Good. Then, continue as planned." Ethan stood when they stood. No salutes were exchanged. None were needed. When he stepped back outside, the city moved around him without noticing. People passed him on the sidewalk, unaware that something had already begun to shift beneath the surface. By afternoon, Ward's irritation had sharpened. Calls were returned slowly. Messages went unanswered. A meeting he expected to control was postponed without explanation. "That's unusual," Marissa said, watching him pace. Ward forced a smile. Temporary, but the certainty he had carried the night before had thinned. That evening, Ethan returned to the rented room. He removed his boots carefully, placed them beside the door, and sat in the chair near the window. The city lights flickered outside. This was the moment he allowed himself, the one he had earned. Not anger, not regret, just the quiet acknowledgement of what had been lost. Marissa's laugh echoed in his memory, not the sound itself, but the absence beneath it. He exhaled slowly. Then he stood, checked his phone once more, and prepared for what came next. Across town, Ward finally received a message. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a notice. Short, procedural, unemotional. His access credentials were being reviewed. Ward stared at the screen, jaw tightening. "This is nothing," he muttered, but for the first time since he had stepped into Ethan's house with confidence. The room felt colder, and the silence did not feel empty. It felt deliberate. Ward believed the delay was a mistake, unaware that the system had already begun closing in, quietly, precisely, and without asking his permission. The review spread quietly. No announcement, no briefing. Just a subtle change in posture among people who knew how to read signals. Meetings shortened. Invitations stopped arriving. Names were removed from distribution lists without explanation. General Ward noticed it by what didn't happen. The office he'd walked into for years no longer felt like his. Conversations paused when he entered. Aides-de-camps avoided his eyes. The deference he was used to had thinned into something careful. He told himself it was temporary. Marissa noticed before he admitted it. "You're distracted," she said, watching him loosen his tie with unnecessary force. "Is this about him?" Ward scoffed. "He's nothing." But his phone stayed silent longer than it should have. Across the city, Ethan moved through his days without drawing attention. He wore civilian clothes now. Simple, unremarkable. He kept the same posture, the same measured pace. If anyone watched him, they would have seen a man who had lost something and accepted it. That was the point. He reported when asked. He listened more than he spoke. Files were opened in front of him, then closed again. Names were mentioned, then carefully avoided. He answered questions that were not questions at all. Patterns, transfers, financial movements disguised as routine. Ward's name appeared often. At night, Ethan returned to the same rented room, same chair, same window. The sadness came once more quietly, like a tide that knew its limits. He did not fight it. He did not indulge it. He let it pass. Marissa's world began to shrink. Invitations stopped. Messages went unanswered. A dinner she had been counting on was suddenly rescheduled, then canceled. A friend she'd relied on for introductions sent a brief apology and stopped responding altogether. "Something's wrong," she said one evening. Ward waved it off, but his jaw was tight. "It's internal. It'll pass." It didn't. The first official notice arrived without warning. Ward was summoned to a mandatory review session. Routine language, non-negotiable attendance. He read it twice. "This is absurd," he said aloud. Marissa tried to laugh, but it didn't land. "You've done nothing wrong." Ward didn't answer. The review room was not the one Ethan had been questioned in. This one was smaller, cleaner. No cameras in the corners, no need. Ward entered with confidence that felt rehearsed. He spoke first. He always did. The questions were calm, precise. Financial disclosures, operational, authorizations, chain of command deviations. Ward answered smoothly at first. Then the pauses began. A document slid across the table. Another followed, then another. Each one connected to the last, forming a picture that did not require explanation. Ward felt the floor shift. "This is out of context," he said. No one argued. By the time he left the room, his phone was vibrating again. This time, the call was real. Marissa answered when he didn't. Her voice cracked as she listened. Her face drained of color. "They froze the accounts," she whispered when the call ended. "All of them." Ward stared at the wall. That night, the news broke quietly. An investigation, high level, ongoing, names not yet released. Marissa sat alone on the couch, scrolling, her reflection staring back at her from the dark screen. The house felt too large now, too exposed. Ward stood near the window, fists clenched. "It's him," Marissa said suddenly. "It has to be." Ward turned slowly. "He's not nothing," she said. "Is he?" Ward didn't answer. For the first time, doubt entered his voice. That call he took. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, piece by piece, rearranging memory. The calm, the lack of reaction, the way he'd walked out without looking back. Ward swallowed. Across the city, Ethan received a brief message. Proceed. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and stepped outside. The confrontation was coming. Not loud, not dramatic. Final. As Ward began to understand who Ethan really was, the order had already been signed, and there would be no place left to hide. The arrest did not come with spectacle. There were no flashing lights outside the house, no shouting in the street. Just 3 vehicles arriving at precise intervals, doors opening in sequence, timing too clean to be coincidence. Marissa noticed first. She stood at the window, curtain drawn just enough to see the street, her breath catching as unfamiliar figures stepped onto the driveway with calm purpose. "Someone's here," she said. Ward didn't move at first. He was seated at the table, phone in his hand, staring at a screen that no longer responded the way it once had. "They're early," he said quietly. The knock came once, firm, controlled. Ward rose, straightened his jacket, and walked to the door like a man rehearsing dignity. When he opened it, the lead officer spoke without raising his voice. "General Lucian Ward," he said, "you are being placed under arrest pending investigation for corruption, abuse of authority, and unauthorized operations." Marissa gasped. Ward did not argue. He didn't need to. The cuffs were already out. As they stepped aside to allow him to move forward, Ward's eyes lifted and stopped. Ethan stood near the curb, not in uniform, not in shadow, calm, still, watching. For a brief moment, the noise of the world fell away. Ward's face changed, not fear, recognition. "You," he said. Ethan met his gaze once. No triumph, no satisfaction. Yes, Ethan replied. Marissa stepped forward, disbelief breaking through panic. This is a mistake, she said. He's nobody. One of the officers glanced at her, then back to Ward. You may want to choose your words carefully. Ward's voice dropped. You planned this. Ethan said nothing. Ward laughed once, short and hollow. All this time, you let us... You assumed, Ethan said calmly. The words landed harder than any accusation. Ward's shoulders sagged slightly as the cuffs closed around his wrists. Who are you really? Ethan took a step closer, close enough that only Ward could hear. I was exactly who I said I was, Ethan said. You just decided it wasn't enough, Ward swallowed. As they escorted him down the driveway, cameras appeared from places that hadn't existed moments before. Phones, lenses, faces leaning forward. Marissa stood frozen at the doorway. By evening, the story was everywhere. Not the version Ward would have written. Not the one Marissa had believed in. Headlines spoke of betrayal at the highest levels, of trust abused, of authority misused. Names surfaced, connections unraveled. The house that had once felt powerful now felt exposed. Marissa's phone lit up again and again. Friends stopped calling midway through sentences. Invitations were withdrawn with polite excuses. Social doors closed without drama, without explanation. She watched it happen in real time. Across the city, Ethan sat in a secure conference room where the air felt different, lighter. A flag stood behind the desk, unmistakable. The president entered without ceremony. They did not shake hands for long. You did exactly what was required, the president said. And you did it quietly. Ethan nodded. That was the objective. There are consequences, the president continued. For you as well. I understand. The president studied him for a moment. You could have reacted. You didn't. That wouldn't have served the mission, Ethan said. A pause. You're cleared, the president said. And reassigned. Ethan stood. No smile, no relief, just acceptance. Outside, the city moved on. Marissa sat alone that night in the house that no longer felt like hers. Messages stopped arriving altogether. The silence she had once mocked now surrounded her. She replayed the moment at the door. Ethan's calm. Ward's realization. It had never been about power. It had been about restraint. Ethan returned to his room later that night, packed his bag, and left it empty behind him. The sadness did not return. Not because it was gone, but because it had been answered. Justice had spoken. Quietly. Ward's arrest was public, but the truth behind it was only beginning to surface. And the final reckoning would leave no doubt about who Ethan had been all along. The fallout did not explode. It collapsed. Marissa felt it first in the smallest ways. A message left unread, a call that rang until it stopped, a name that no longer opened doors. By morning, the house felt unfamiliar. The silence pressed in, heavier than any argument ever had. She walked from room to room, touching things that had once felt permanent. Art, furniture. The polished surfaces she had believed proved success. None of it answered her. The news cycle moved quickly, but not away from her. Ward's arrest had ignited something wider. Analysts spoke carefully. Former allies spoke not at all. The general's name became shorthand for a network of corruption that stretched farther than anyone wanted to admit. And Marissa's name followed it. She tried to reach people who had once needed her presence. They were suddenly busy, traveling, in meetings that never ended. Her social circle didn't turn on her. It vanished. Across the city, Ethan moved through transition with the same restraint he had carried through loss. His reassignment placed him in a role that carried no public recognition and no visible power. The work mattered anyway. Briefings replaced interrogations. Trust replaced scrutiny. He listened. He advised. He declined attention. One evening, a junior officer asked him quietly, "Did you know it would end like that?" Ethan considered the question. "I knew it would end," he said. "The rest wasn't mine to decide." Marissa sat alone at the dining table that night, laptop open, headlines scrolling past her reflection. She searched for Ethan's name. Nothing. No interviews, no photos, no statement. That hurt more than anger would have. She replayed the moment in the living room. The uniform, the calm, the way he had answered the phone without looking at either of them. She had mistaken silence for weakness because she needed it to be true. Now there was no one left to convince. By the end of the week, the house went on the market. The art followed, then the car. Each sale chipped away at the image she had built her life around. Power, she learned too late, did not love her back. Ethan stood on a quiet overlook one evening, city lights stretching out beneath him. The wind was cool, steady. He watched it move across the water, forming patterns that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing waiting on his phone. No orders, no updates. He stood there anyway. The sadness came, not sharp, not overwhelming, just present. A reminder of what had been real once. He did not push it away. He acknowledged it, then let it settle where it belonged. He had loved her. That truth did not disappear just because everything else had. Behind him, footsteps approached. The president's security detail remained at a respectful distance. "You won't hear from them again," the president said, standing beside him. "Not officially." Ethan nodded. "You're free to walk away if you want," the president added. "Or stay. There's work either way." Ethan looked out over the water. "I'll stay." The president smiled once, briefly. "I thought you would." They parted without ceremony. Later that night, Marissa stood in an empty house, keys placed carefully on the counter. No one had asked for them yet. She left them anyway. The door closed behind her without resistance. Across town, Ethan packed light. He always had. He didn't look back. What Marissa lost could never be reclaimed. And what Ethan chose next would finally reveal what redemption looked like without applause. Time did what it always did. It moved forward without ceremony. The investigation concluded with language that left no room for interpretation. Charges were formal. Sentences were public. General Ward's name became a cautionary reference in briefings and classrooms, stripped of rank, authority, and legacy. The final confrontation replayed endlessly in his mind. Not the cuffs, not the cameras, but the moment he realized who Ethan had been standing in front of him all along. There was no appeal that mattered. Marissa's collapse was quieter. She rented a smaller place in a part of the city where no one recognized her name. The invitations never returned. The people she had once measured herself against moved on without looking back. Power had been her language, and without it, she found herself fluent in nothing. She saw Ethan once more, from a distance. He was exiting a federal building with two men she did not recognize. His posture was the same, his expression unchanged. He did not see her, or if he did not acknowledge it. She understood then that redemption had never been about winning him back. It had never been about her at all. Ethan's life settled into a rhythm that did not need explanation. His work remained classified. His influence remained quiet. Decisions shifted because of him, not toward him. That was how he preferred it. On a clear evening months later, he stood alone on a stretch of coastline far from the city. The uniform was gone now, replaced by civilian clothes that carried no history. The wind moved steadily across the water, reshaping the surface in patterns that never repeated. He felt no triumph, no bitterness, only alignment. He had done what he was asked to do. He had endured what he was meant to endure. The betrayal had not broken him. The humiliation had not defined him. And the power he had carried had never been his to display. He thought once briefly of the house that had turned cold, of the laughter, of the moment the uniform had been disrespected. Then he let it go, because some endings are not about revenge or recognition. Some endings are about knowing you stayed exactly who you were when everything around you tried to make you smaller. Ethan turned away from the water and walked back toward the waiting vehicle. There would be another assignment, another quiet correction, another problem solved without his name attached to it. That was the work. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.